Okay, so today we are looking at solving two-step and multi-step inequalities, okay? So the big thing here is it's not very much different mathematically from what we were doing. The thing that's going to be different are your answers, okay? So when we talk inequalities, the thing that happens is you don't get a single answer, instead you get a range of answers, okay? When I say inequalities, the thing that should come to mind are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, okay? Those are the things. So it doesn't mean that you'll solve and get like x is equal to 6. Instead, you might get x is greater than 6. So that means it would work for any number as long as it is bigger than 6. So there's a difference. You get a range for an answer instead of an individual one, okay? Now, as we work through this, there's only a few things that change, but mainly you're going to work this as if the inequality is your equal sign. So if things are on the same side, you'll just combine them. If you have to move it to the other side, you'll use the inverse operation like we were doing. Okay? So looking at this first one, solve the inequality and then graph the solution. That's the other thing, is we will have to graph this. Okay, which we will be easily able to do. So the idea here is to get b by itself. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is subtract 45 from both sides, because that is going to allow me to get the b by itself. So then that leaves me with 2b is greater than 61 minus 45. What does that get us? Somebody say 16. Okay, now, thank you. Some things that I want to talk about before we get too far into this. Notice I said 2b is greater than 16. When it faces the first one, you always say greater than. When it faces the second one, you always say less than. Okay? When there is a line underneath it, which we'll see in some examples in a few minutes, that means greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Okay? That is going to be big as we go forward, because when you graph it, whether it is just a greater than or a less than, or if it is one that is an equal to, is going to help you with the dot that you have to make on your graph. Okay? So just know that that's coming. Now, this problem is pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward, because to solve this, what is the thing we have to do? Divide by 2. So as of now, everything we have done is just like what we would do if there was an equal sign there, right? So you solve this and you end up getting b is greater than 8. Okay? Now, that's the part for solving the inequality. Now we have to graph it. Okay? I give you these a lot of the times, but sometimes I don't. So right here I did not. So to graph an inequality, you need what looks like a number line. Okay? It is a number line, but we're going to make it a little bit different. Okay? Now, how it works and how I'm going to have you do it in class. Okay? Unless I give it to you and create it for you, when you create your own, you're going to have to create it by using what they told you and what you solved for. So do you see how we solved, and there's the number 8 in our inequality? That means when I make my number line, the one that I want in the center is the number 8. Now, to show me the number line, I do want you to put a number to the right and a number to the left. Okay? Do I care what the number is? No, I don't. But generally, it's pretty easy if you just go one number up, one number down. The thing to remember about number lines, though, is as you go from left to right, they have to get bigger. So, for instance, right here is 8. Bigger than 8 goes to the right. What number would go over here? 9. That is correct. And if we go to the left, we should get smaller. So that would be 7. Y'all see how it goes. All right, now, here's the part that gets super fun. Right here, this inequality, okay? It is not an or equal to, because there's no line underneath. That means you will have an open dot, okay? So as I go to graph this, on the number 8, I'm going to have an open dot. The reason that we leave it open is because that tells us that the number 8 is not a solution. That is where it starts, but it is not one. So if you had said 8 in this, if you had plugged 8 into this problem, it would have been wrong, okay? How you need to look at this is say, okay, right here my B is bigger than all the 8, okay? Because how I like to view it, you see how there's, and I'll just draw a little picture here. Do you see how the inequality is opened this way? Okay, everybody see that? How I was taught and how it helps me is I think of that being in alligator mouth. And we'll put a little blood there on the teeth. Okay, all right? I always think of it as an alligator mouth. And if I'm an alligator, I always want to eat whatever is bigger. No, I want to eat whatever's bigger. I'm an alligator. I got a big old stomach. I want to eat the biggest number I can, right? So in this case, if the alligator mouth is facing the B, that means the B has to be bigger than 8. So when I come over here and I draw my line for my graph, my answer is B is any value that is bigger than 8. Well, to be bigger, you've got to go to the right. Okay. Now, before I even talk about it, has anybody in here ever heard of a shortcut or a cheat for this? I saw one head nod. Okay. How some teachers teach this is, do you see how this kind of also makes an arrowhead? They always teach kids, hey, that's the way that your line should go. All right, so you see how this matches that arrow. If I made that a better, more defined arrow. Are y'all with me? What? All right, so how this matches up with that. Okay, now, here's the one thing I want to tell you. This only works when the letter comes first. If the letter is the second number, that trick does not work. Okay? That's why I want you to think of, hey, I've got to eat something. Which one's bigger? Bigger means to the right. Smaller means to the left. That's how I like to think about it. Okay? All right. So let's keep moving. Now, let's work this inequality. Notice here, we have our line underneath. So what this inequality is saying, 8 minus 3y is greater than or equal to 29. Okay? So, let's solve it. Step number 1 is to get 3y by itself. Okay? So, we're left with negative 3y is greater than or equal to 21. All right. Now, here is the fun part about inequalities. Are you ready for the first rule breaker? The first thing that'll make it different, okay, than solving a regular problem. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, it means you have to flip your inequality. So instead of facing the negative 3y, once you divide by negative 3, it will now face the other side. Okay? What I generally do to remind myself of this, I'll highlight it. The step that I'm dividing by a negative number, I will highlight my sign to remind myself, hey, that means when I write this, it's not going to be y is greater than, but it's going to be y is less than or equal to. And then your rules still apply like always. Positive 21 divided by negative 3 becomes negative 7. Okay? Then it's about creating your graph. Okay? I know that my center point needs to be negative 7. Now, when they are negative numbers, you really got to think. If it is a smaller negative number, the number is actually kind of bigger, right? So that means on the left-hand side, I don't put -6, but I put -8 because that is further away from 0. And then on the right-hand side, I'm getting closer to 0, so it would be -6. Okay? Now, the next thing, when we say that y is less than or equal to -7, well, the part equal to means that -7 needs to be included in our answers, right? So, when we put our dot, we are actually going to color it in to let us know that -7 is part of the solution choice. So this means the answers are anything that is less than -7. Okay? But -7 will work. Well, to be less than -7 means to be smaller. Smaller things go to the left. So this would be the picture of your graph. Any questions? Okay, so the things we figured out so far about inequalities. Inequalities are ranges of numbers and not a single number. Okay, it's an open dot when there is no line underneath your inequality. It is a closed dot when there is a line underneath. And then the other thing we figured out is when you divide or multiply by a negative number, the inequality flips. Okay? Now, that's not adding or subtracting. All right, so let's keep forward. Keep moving forward. All right, so here's another one. Let's solve this inequality together. Okay? So you're looking at this. -12 is greater than or equal to 3x plus 6. Step number 1 is to get 3x by itself. So you do that by subtracting. So you get -18 is greater than or equal to 3x. Okay, now I'm about to ask y'all some questions and we're going to talk through some things. What do I need to divide by? 3. That is correct. Now, here's the part you've got to understand. You divided by what number? 3. Is the 3 positive or is the 3 negative? Positive. So do we have to flip a sign? No, we do not, because the number we divided by is positive. So -18 divided by 3 is -6. You leave your inequality the same way, and you have x left over. Okay? Now, at this point, you've got it reduced down. Okay, so I come over here, and I'm going to go to graph it. I know I've got a -6 in the middle. Something smaller than -6 is -7, because it is further away. Something bigger than -6 is -5, because it is closer to 0. Any questions on that? Negative numbers are the hardest ones. All right, now, this is a perfect example of when that cheat that we talked about would not work. If you were one that just says, hey, I'm going to draw my arrow in whatever direction this is pointing, this is where it would not work because your letter is not in the front, it is in the back. So it's red and it looks a little bit different than it normally does. Okay? However, let's go through and graph this. What kind of dot are we going to have at -6?
Closed dot.
A closed dot because it is an equal to. Now, what this is saying is that -6 is greater than or equal to x. So let me ask you this. Is the mouth facing -6? If I were to draw my alligator, it's going this way, right? Would y'all agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going that way. So it does mean that the -6 is bigger. Well, that means your answers, because x is on the other side, has to be everything smaller than or equal to negative 6. Well, how do you show smaller on the number line, on the graph? To the left. So it would be everything in this direction. Okay? See how that breaks your little cheat? That's something you've got to remember. I don't like showing the cheat, but I like talking about it because some students do that. Okay? All right. Let's keep going. All right. Now, as I look at this next example, solve the inequality, this one's a little bit different. There's more things you've got to do than just subtract or add over. What are we starting with here? X plus 5 divided by negative 2 is greater than 3. Okay? Well, how do we get rid of this? To solve this, what's the first thing we got to do? I heard some mumbling. Hopefully somebody's saying we got to get rid of dividing by negative 2, right? Yeah, so you would multiply. Now, I think somebody was saying this. I'm about to do something. I'm going to do this as soon as I write that. Why did I highlight my inequality? Because it's a negative. I am multiplying by a negative number. So that means as I work through this next piece, I know I'm going to have to flip the inequality. So I'm left with x plus 5 after the negative 2's cancel. I then have to flip my inequality, and 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Now, at this point, it's solving a regular problem. To get x by itself, we need to subtract 5. X is less than negative 11. And that is your simplified inequality. So then it is creating your number line. And guys, a lot of times I give this to you. Right now I'm making it hard on you so that you can see that first and you'll appreciate it when I give it to you. Isn't that right? So we're right there. We've got that. So I know my first number is going to be negative 11. Something smaller than negative 11. Negative what? Negative 12. Something bigger would be negative 10. You guys are so smart. So then it's looking at this. Okay, what kind of dot am I going to have at negative 11?
Open dot.
An open dot, that is correct. And here our alligator is eating the negative 11, so that's the biggest number. That means everything else has to be smaller, so it goes to the left. If you are confused as you're looking at this, I'm telling you, how I'm talking about it seems really kind of lame and long, but when you talk it through and think about it, it will truly help you. Okay? All right. We've got one example left. Okay? I'm going to give y'all about 5 minutes to work that on your own, okay? And then we'll check back in. Ready, set, go. All right, so after having some time to work with it. Now, this problem's a little bit different because it is considered a multi-step problem. Because before you can do anything, you've actually got to distribute and work some of this math out. So step 1 is actually taking that 2 and distributing it to both pieces. So that means you would have 3 plus 2x plus 8 is greater than 3. Okay? Then it's remembering, hey, when we go to simplify here, these items are on the same side of the inequality, so we just combine them together. So that means we would end up with 2x plus 11 is greater than 3. And at that point, it's like the other examples we have seen. Subtract 11 from both sides. 2x is greater than negative 8. Then we would divide by 2. The trick there is remembering you are dividing by a positive number, so you do not flip the inequality. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So x is greater than negative 4. You come over here and create your graph. You've got a line at negative 4. Something bigger would be negative 5. Something smaller would be negative 3. It is an open dot. And then your x is facing, or the inequality is facing the x. That means it wants to eat the x. The x has to be bigger than negative 4. And everything bigger goes to the right. Okay? All right.